Louisa Wong.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Thank you very much. And I want to acknowledge the Speaker's Science Forum on Health and Housing and Health that I attended on the 12th of August. And the focus of this Health and Housing Forum that Dr Jian Yang actually introduced was to look at the relationship between housing and how it contributes to the health and wellbeing of New Zealanders. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Philippa Howden-Chapman, who was one of the presenters on that evening. And what Professor Howden-Chapman highlighted was that in New Zealand we have 1,600 people die every year from preventable illnesses because they're living in cold, wet, damp and inefficiently heated homes. So for people out there, over the last couple of days we've been debating the health and safety legislation. 100 people die every year in work-related accidents. Well, actually 1,600 people are dying every year because they live in cold, damp houses. And the interesting thing about Professor Howden-Chapman's analysis was that, in fact, 960 children are dying every year in cold, damp houses that are inefficiently heated. I'd also like to take this opportunity, Mr Speaker, to thank UNICEF and the Child Poverty Action Group, who have just launched an initiative wanting to focus on this issue of warrant of fitnesses, because in New Zealand, unfortunately, 305,000 children are living in poverty. And of those 305 children living in poverty, 213,500 children live in rental accommodation. So the relevance to a warrant of fitness piece of legislation to New Zealand is immense, I would have thought. 61,000 of our children live in state houses, 252,500 live in rental accommodation with no warrant of fitness. So what does that actually mean? What does that translate to? Well, in addition to the 960-odd children who are dying every year, actually we have 40,000 children who are hospitalised with preventable illnesses. Now, I actually think that's incredibly profound. And New Zealanders thought it was incredibly profound when in July this year, a coroner, Brent Shortland, actually determined that Emilita Bourne, a young toddler, living in a home, and I want to quote some of the things that were said in the coroner's report. So in winter last year, this young girl died, and she was living in a home where there were buckets under a leak in the hallway ceiling, that there was an unused heater in the family home because they couldn't afford to turn it on, Mr Speaker, because electricity was too expensive, and she lived in a home where one of her older siblings had rheumatic fever. Now, there was outrage by New Zealanders. The media interest has been incredibly intense because a coroner had the audacity, I don't call it audacity, I actually call it leadership, to actually put some blame where that blame should be attributed, because this young girl, Emilita Bourne, should not have died. And now we have a scenario where Professor Philippa Howden-Chapman, an esteemed public health academic specialist, someone who's dedicated her whole entire life to the housing sector, has told Parliament that 1,600 people of those 960 children are dying every year because they live in cold, damp, wet houses with inefficient heating. And so, Mr Chair, when I think about the whole history of housing provision in New Zealand, you do have to go back to the 50s. And so in the 1950s, we built 30,000 houses. That waiting list back then was 45,000. 45,000 New Zealanders, Mr Speaker, went on the waiting list. They wanted a state home. What did National do when they got in? Well, actually, they raised the rents. They wanted to make this program unattractive. But what we know today is that there are 69,000 technically Housing New Zealand houses, only 64,000 are available. In the lifetime of houses in New Zealand, we've sold 31,000, they're in private hands, but today we have 4,541 priority A and B families wanting a home. And these people are deemed at risk with a severe and persistent housing need that must be addressed immediately. So my question to the government is, are you going to sell 10,000 houses, like you say, by 2017? That's been your stated objective when we've got that much need? It makes absolutely no sense. And actually this government needs to represent all New Zealanders and our most vulnerable New Zealanders, and what this proves is that they don't care. Thank you.
Order. The time for this debate has expired. I call on Members' Order of the Day number 1.